This time on Low Boost, we do a brake upgrade on our thrift horse Mustang. So, if you guys aren't familiar with 1964 to 66 Mustangs, and even maybe some of the later ones, the 6-cylinder varieties had some weaker parts, weaker spindles, not as good brakes, and among other things like the rear end, the transmission. So a lot of those things we are gonna have to upgrade on this. Now, it would have been easier to get a V8 Mustang and just take it from there, but we got such a good deal on this thing and it's in pretty decent shape, so we're just gonna send it and upgrade with all the parts. So if you guys are in the same situation, you might be able to do the same thing too. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button to follow along. So, we got an entire disc brake swap kit from discbrakeswap.com. And it comes with the spindles, the bearings, and the disc brakes, rotors, and pads to upgrade the front on this to a full disc brake setup. This is a beautiful piece that it has everything all put together. Slotted rotors, and they're 5-lug. And then if you didn't know, the 6-cylinder Mustangs came with a 4-lug variety, and the spindle is not really strong enough to handle the extra weight and everything from the 8-cylinder we're gonna swap in. Little boy, that little boy. Look how tiny that is. And mind you, there's no power brakes on this. Front and rear, tiny little drums, no power brakes. This thing is very difficult to stop. So, I took the old brace off, obviously old and rusted. We got some new ones from CJ Pony Parts that we're gonna put on when we're done. Also got V8 springs for this and Coney shocks too. So we're gonna do this whole thing while we're at it. Simple pop off of that. Next we got the cotter pin. All right, so take the cap off, unscrew this, you pull the pin out, and then you need a 1/1/16 socket to unscrew the cap for the bearing, and then all of this should just come right off. I mean, this was obviously greased, and literally this thing just sits with the 2 bearings there like that. It's actually not in terrible shape, but it is pretty shot inside. So here you have your greased up spindle and the shoes, which are not in terrible shape, but this spindle itself is not going to be able to hold the extra weight of the car. So this whole assembly's got to come off. So it's always tough to see inside, but you got a couple of nuts to get off on that side. All right, next I removed the 2 bolts out of the bottom of this. I was able to feed it up through behind in like that. And the 2 from the top, I just left them in there so they stay intact. And this should pop right out. Just like that. These aren't too bad, they're Monroe's, but they're old and we're gonna replace them with much better shocks. Now I know some of you guys will think, oh, I'm really strong, I'm banging out with a hammer or using some torch and create some heat. Listen, just get the right tool to do the job. These ball joint separators are just freaking awesome. And they will pop out any ball joint with just a little bit of torque. Boom! Pop! Go to weasel, because the weasel said pop! See that? This thing's awesome. Oh! That was loud. Boom! I'm sorry, but you can hear the sound of how violent this thing comes off. There's not a snowball's chance in hell you can do this with a hammer or anything else. So, taking the springs off, I got some cheapo spring compressors, but they work. What I did was I undid I broke all the ball joints, so this actually sits a little bit lower. And I think that's gonna make it easier to take the spring out. We're gonna compress it and then pull it out from the bottom. Listen, don't waste your time with these Harbor Freight spring compressors. I barely was able to get them out, and there's no chance I would have got it back in. So I'm gonna put a link in the description below to the spring compressor I ended up ordering to be able to install these springs back in correctly, and it would have taken them out a lot easier as well. So here are the old spindles. You can see they're all greased up, and you can see the size difference between the new ones. So these are a lot thicker. They're gonna be able to handle a lot more weight, especially if you're gonna have the increased weight on top of the car with the V8 that's gonna go in it. There it is right there. There's our AOD transmission. That's an LS1 T56 that I really was tempted to put into this thing, but we're gonna do the 351. There's this iron 6.0 back there, just in case I blow up my E36 Turbo LS swap. But these will be much better. We're gonna grease them up, put everything on, and see how it goes. Spindle, bare form on there. And obviously you got your tie rod and everything's bigger. So they actually came with new tie rod connectors. Up until this point, I didn't actually realize that you have to replace this 6-cylinder steering rack with the V8 steering rack for 2 reasons. 1, it's all a different size and it's all going to match up differently with the pitman arm. And 2, the 6-cylinder steering rack will actually hit the oil pan on any V8 engine you're going to put in it. So in addition to getting the brake kit, you also have to get the steering rack. So, got the spindle on. I did it off camera because it's a pain in the butt, but we come in through the top and just smash it in and then have somebody stand on the lower control arm. It was easier to do it actually with the spindle on, that way you don't have to add it in afterwards. But what we did was, the grabber, we cut a pipe on the spring compressor to give us some more leverage. Because when you get down to the bottom, this thing sticks out and hits the perch. It was hitting it right here. So if you do that, you can compress the spring all the way without it actually hitting that, so you could shove it in, and then we just backed it right out of the top there. So we're able to get that in next. We got to do all the rest of the stuff on the spindle, the brakes, and everything for that, and we got to put the new shocks in there as well. Now that we got the spindle and the spring in, next we're going to do different shocks. We're going to do the same ones we used to the rear, the KYB gas adjust. They're going to give us a better ride than the stock ones, but give us a little bit more of a performance feel as well. So between the springs and the shocks, it should drastically improve the ride quality. Now, couldn't really get these off because these were kind of stuck on, but everything else can go on with it. You just got to kind of slowly work this through, and it should go down because the other ones came out. So just drop it straight down and through, and it will rest on that when we screw everything in, but we got to push it down from the bottom to touch the bottom of the shock. So once the spring is back in, it's easier to actually jack up from the bottom of the control arm to make it nice and level for the actual shock to go through. So I just lowered with the jack a little bit right on back on the shock towers, and they're in. So now we got KYB gas adjust shocks with the V8 springs and the nice new spindles. We're gonna get to work on the brakes now. All right, so I got the front suspension all set up and ready to do the brakes on the Thrift Horse Mustang. That's what we're gonna be doing in the next episode. So make sure you guys are not only subscribed to the channel, but hit that little bell to stay up to date on all the notifications, because there's gonna be at least 2 to 3 more episodes just on this brake swap alone, because I'm trying to be as in-depth as possible to show you guys that you can do it yourselves, and to showcase if this disc brake swap setup is worth the price. Also, I have a bunch of merch that I'm starting to put up, so in the description below, I got some t-shirts and stuff, and let me know if you guys would like a certain design. I might be able to do something with the Mustang. Right now it's just about my E36 Turbo LS swap, but you guys let me know in the comments what you guys think I should do. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.